Have you ever wondered if you're doing enough to keep your store secured? Aaron from Bri-Bet joins us today to talk about how to keep your store secured from potential criminals, as well as the top things that you should consider around security.
Welcome to the KayaCast, the podcast for cannabis businesses looking to launch, grow, and scale their operations. Each week, we bring you interviews with industry experts and successful retailers, plus practical tips and strategies to help you succeed in the fast-growing cannabis industry.
You guys have such an extensive experience helping the cannabis industry with security. What are some of the mistakes that you see cannabis businesses do when starting up their security plan?
When starting up their security plan, well, first of all, a lot of cannabis businesses here in Maryland, they don't involve security that early in their business plan. I see that a lot. So you'll see new entrepreneurs coming into Maryland and they're trying to balance their budget. They're trying to figure out what to spend money on. And it's tough, when you're just starting out, because everyone says you take your budget and whatever numbers you put in there, you just have to double it. And when you get to that stage, you have to start trying to cut expenses because it's so hard to get funding for cannabis businesses. So what I wind up noticing is security oftentimes at that beginning stage is, we'll just say it's not represented as well as it should be for some of these businesses starting up. And that can have a lot of issues down the line. You see it, and oftentimes you'll wind up paying for it. So like, for example, I went into a cannabis business that had been operational for a couple of months and they just wanted to do some consulting. I went in there and I noticed that their exit door had a clear path to like their vault area where they kept their cannabis. And they didn't have any panic buttons and the security was lax in that area. And I was like, you guys, you got to make sure that this is a very, very secure area. There should be panic buttons. You make sure you have great camera coverage there because it is so dangerous. And, if a criminal were to try to enter, they'd enter through that back door. They could. So definitely not involving cannabis security early in the build out process. Something else I see, it's not happening as much now, but putting the ATMs like by doors and windows and entrances and things like that. People are trying to steal those ATMs these days, man. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. I mean, it's like they'll drive trucks up and just yank them out, pull the ATMs out. Now, the ATM companies have been recently putting less cash in, just so that the desire for stealing them should go down. But, some of the criminals, they don't know. They see an ATM that they think is an easy grab and they go for it. And then not only is your ATM hosed up, but your window or door was pulled off and you got to go through, a new build out. That can be a pain, truly.
I would have never thought that would be a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just cannabis businesses. It happens. I mean, all the time they're stealing these ATMs, but because cannabis is such a cash heavy business and because ATMs are utilized so frequently, you got to try to put them back, make sure they're in a safe spot for sure. Another thing that I see that's a mistake is, at least in Maryland, I'm not sure about the other states, but in Maryland, you don't have to hire physical security. So like boots on the ground guys, that's like what we do. So for a lot of businesses here in Maryland, we're kind of like optional. It's one of those things where it's like, do I really want to put out the cash for this? But what you realize is the businesses that have a good security presence, and when I say a good security presence, I mean, you can't have sloppy guys in there, and nobody likes sloppy security, in your business. But if you have like stand-up people in there, stand-up security guards, they wind up making the customers feel safe, the staff feel safe, and criminals are like, maybe not this one. Tend to overlook it. Yeah.
If I was operating a dispensary, what are some of the good tenets of perimeter security?
Good tenets of perimeter security. That's a great question. I'd say for sure, make sure you have 360 degrees of camera coverage around your building, and make sure you have good lighting. So having a great camera setup and good lighting, these two things are like non-negotiable in my opinion, because if your cannabis business is going to be hit, it's probably going to be at night, most likely. They'll try to break in late at night, and having good camera coverage, especially if you're connected to like a forest, or if your facility's kind of tucked away in the corner, making sure that you can see all 360 degrees around, and there's great lighting. That scares criminals, man. They do not like good lighting and good camera coverage at all. No, yeah, not at all. Make sure that if you have a business, like let's say you have a dispensary in a shopping center, make sure if you share an adjacent wall, like with another business, especially if it's a business that's vacant, like an empty business, make sure you have good coverage there, and make sure your security inside, especially around that area, is like well protected and on point, because more often than not, I've seen people literally cut through adjacent walls to get into dispensaries. I mean, I see that like maybe 2 out of 3, 2 out of 3, they're cutting through an adjacent wall to get in your business because they think they can bypass the security. And truthfully, normally the perimeter security is on point. The interior security systems and alarms are always on point as well. But criminals oftentimes worry about that perimeter security. And if they see camera and lighting, that's really good. They try to go for that adjacent wall with a vacant business.
How often do you see criminals cut off power? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I've seen it done. This happened where some of these guys, they were dressed like maintenance workers. And so if you have good camera coverage, like I said, oftentimes you'll have someone who's on the alarm response, like a business owner or a head of security or something, and they'll be checking the cameras. If there's any type of alarm goes off, the police can be notified, the management can be notified, anybody can be notified. And what winds up happening is if an alarm goes off and you check the cameras and you're like, oh, it just looks like maintenance guys, maybe try to stop the police from coming, because you're thinking, oh, somebody just accidentally messed up the alarm, just forget it, let it go. These guys are just like maintenance workers. They climbed on top of the building, they cut the power to the lights, and then they looked like they were actually doing maintenance on an adjacent building. Like I said, they wound up cutting a hole through the wall and trying to break inside. The interior security was so good at that facility, they didn't get anything. They couldn't really get anywhere, but it was just seeing that level of intelligence that went into this. It's really well planned.
They sound like professionals.
If you own a cannabis business and you're trying to prepare your team, I'm going to speak on the dispensary side because that's where my bread and butter is. I'd say if you're trying to make sure your team is as safe as possible, I mentioned panic buttons a little bit earlier. Definitely do like a full staff training on panic button utilization. Go into detail with that. Talk to them about, or have the company that installed your panic buttons come and do a training. Oftentimes the good ones will do it, most of the time free. They'll just have staff practice activating the buttons and seeing how that works. I think that's a very easy thing to do, and it familiarizes them with how they work. Oftentimes, like if I'm a front desk person at a dispensary and I know there's a panic button under the desk, it's more like a scary thing. I don't want to bump it or touch it or accidentally boom and then just have like, all the police roll up into the dispensary. It's kind of scary. But so, actually training them on that is very useful. Something else I recommend to do, especially if you don't have a security team that works at your facility, is using the buddy system. So if I'm an opening manager and I'm going to open up my dispensary, then what I should be doing is waiting till another staff member gets there and entering the building as a duo, as a team, just so it's not a single person, because you're way less likely to be targeted if you're in a group. And I've heard bad stories about people who've gone to open up facilities, by themselves, and even opening and closing, you should be utilizing the buddy system. But I've seen people going and opening up dispensaries and then getting caught up, and somebody was waiting for them around the corner in a bush and grabbing them, and they don't have time to press a panic button or do anything. It's scary stuff, man. So I definitely say if you own a cannabis business and you don't have security opening and closing the facility, especially armed security, Make sure you're using a buddy system. Make sure you're training your employees on how to look. And if they see something that makes them uncomfortable, or they see a person kind of hanging around by the door, it looks like they've been there a while, to just check it out. And, don't be a fool. Don't get yourself in trouble. It's too dangerous. Another thing I would say for training your staff is make sure they're good at communicating. This is just on on a daily basis. If you have a staff member in your dispensary and maybe they go outside to take a lunch break and they see somebody hanging around the back taking pictures, the back of the building, stuff like that, you know, say something. Say something to management. Say, hey, did you see this guy over there doing this? Make sure you communicate it. Oftentimes, people will get a feeling that they should talk about something and they don't wind up acting on it just because they don't want to, rock the boat too much. But it's important to talk about these things. Maybe the guy's just back there because he really likes the weed you sold him and he wants to put you on Instagram or something. He's just taking pictures of the back. I don't know. But, mention it, bring it up. And along with communicating about suspicious people, let's talk about banned persons. There's nothing worse than a customer that like a manager banned. And maybe the manager told him he was banned, or, maybe they left a message instead of, talking about, the fact that he's banned with him in person. Then this banned customer comes into the store and your front desk person doesn't know he's banned. It's not in any notes in the system. He gets halfway through the check-in process. He's inside the building. They're like, you can't shop here, buddy. I've seen that happen. I don't know how many times, a lot of times. And it never ends well because he probably wasn't banned because he was too nice, usually.
How often should you go through panic button training?
I mean, you don't have to do it, all the time. I say like at minimum twice a year, I think is good. Or if you have like a large hiring going on, like let's say, your business is expanding, 420 is around the corner and you just brought on 10 new people. Maybe in part of that onboarding, you can just come through and have a little panic button training. It doesn't hurt. It's never a bad thing. You can never have too much training. I always say it's better safe than sorry. And a good security technology company that did that installation, they'll be more than happy to do it. The ones I work with, usually they're like, yeah, of course. I just give them a call. I say, hey, this spot had a pretty big hiring recently. You want to come by and do a panic button training? You shouldn't have any issues with that.
That's what I hear. A lot of break-ins are internal. There's always an internal kind of involvement
Usually.
with it. Have you seen any protocols that really work to deter internal influence?
I would say having really everybody's always afraid of maybe you have an inventory manager or someone like that because they're looking at all the logs all the time. They wind up stealing or something and it's hard to catch because like they're the head of inventory. People worry about that a lot. As far as ways to kind of get around that, having really good cameras always, I'll talk about the cameras all day and night, but if you can have great coverage, especially in your vault, where the flower is and on the perimeter, also around the registers and anywhere where a product is exchanged for cash, you're generally covered. And if you have multiple inventory managers, or you have your general manager involved at some level and just overseeing the inventory process, it's harder for someone to get away with stuff like that.
What are the top 3 to 5 things that somebody should have regarding security?
Top 3 to 5 things that somebody should have regarding security. Well, I think alarm response is a good thing you should have. I think if you hire a security company, they should have a manager that's always keyed in on the alarm response. This is important because you don't want to be that person that gets a call at 3 a.m. to go check out the business because the alarm went off and you're like, it's probably just a false alarm, or you don't want to get up and go. At least for my company, the way we do it is if that alarm goes off, no matter what, I got to be there. I can check the cameras and see if it's a false alarm or this or that, but I got to show up, no matter what. Now, oftentimes it is a false alarm, but got to check the building, got to make sure everything's clear. And it's not very safe, if you're a general manager, you don't have training in that aspect. You don't really want to even go check out your business at 3 a.m. So that's something I would definitely recommend to make the business more secure. Definitely invest in very good quality alarms and cameras and a good camera software for sure. For sure. Make sure your lighting is good. Before you even open your business, getting a good location is important. Like I said, you don't want to be kind of tucked away behind a building. You want to be more out in the open. I mean, obviously, it's better for getting people to come shop at your place if it's easier to find, but it's also safer usually. Yeah, I'd say those are my top things, top recommendations.
What should somebody look for when hiring a security firm?
The number one thing you should look for when hiring a security firm is you want to find a company that's flexible, that will work with you. I always say cannabis businesses are so different. That's the great thing about this industry is because I talk to so many different entrepreneurs. They have all these different ideas. Like I see so many creative people in this space and their businesses are always so different and because it's often an extension of them. And so you may have a business that's completely different to somebody else's business. You may have ideas that are different than somebody else's ideas. And the vendors that you hire they're not going to be one size fits all. You have to find someone that's going to be customized to your place of business. I always say, I don't have a single security program that runs exactly like another. Like every single program I have is bespoke to that cannabis business. And finding a security partner that can do that and is flexible like that is very important. It's easier for my company because we're smaller, we're a Maryland business. And, because we're here and I'm here all the time in Maryland, I can go and talk to the owners and the management and make sure that the program is customized to their location. But yeah, you want to find flexibility. You want to make sure that if you want your security team to be like undercover, like we'll have a location where my guys are essentially undercover. They're wearing plain clothes, or they'll wear your cannabis business logo on their shirt. They're concealed carrying. They just look like staff. I've worked where I just look like staff. I had one person accuse me of being the owner of the business just because I had my nose in everything going on that day. They're like, "Are you the owner?" I said, "No, I'm just nosy." I'm just a nosy security guard. But yeah, so flexibility,
When does it make sense to have an undercover security team?
so there's a couple reasons why somebody may do it. Typically, from an ownership perspective, the reason why they're going to want the security team to be undercover is because an overt security presence may make customers feel uncomfortable. At the end of the day, this is a retail business. If you're a dispensary, and like people don't go to like a Hot Topic and there's like a guy there with like a bulletproof vest and a rifle outside the Hot Topic. Sometimes that can be uncomfortable for people, and I get it. And so, but the ownership, they understand that they want their customers and their staff to be protected, but they want to make sure that the business is welcoming. So it's incumbent on, I have to hire guys that are very welcoming and very friendly for these businesses. And then I have to make sure that they work and they fit in there like they're part of the family, like they're part of the culture. And then we can see that often having a very positive effect, even on sales and on customer retention, things of that nature. You may want to have a more overt presence, if you would like more of like a deterrent, like you're afraid of certain things happening in your business and you'd rather, if a person were to come by and think about starting some trouble, they see the garden like, no, not going to start trouble here, so it just kind of depends on your location and the things that you want and how you wish your business to be perceived from a customer perspective.
It would be very uncomfortable as a normal customer to go into a retail shop and see someone just fully armed.
Yeah.
And I think it makes the place look more dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, I could do that. People, especially the bulletproof vest, right? Because And you see it here in Maryland quite a bit. You'll see guys with a full bulletproof vest on. My company policy, we're pretty against that, man. I just think it's overkill. I mean, you don't really see police officers even with the full bulletproof vest on looking like SWAT or something like that. So sometimes it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but there's always a time and place for stuff like that.
How important is it to have armed security versus non-armed?
That's a great question, actually. Armed versus unarmed. My company, we don't do unarmed in cannabis businesses. We don't do it because there's too much cash and the risk can be generally too high. In 2015, the Wharton School of Business at UPenn did a study where they found that 50% of cannabis businesses get burglarized. Now, this was 10 years ago, so I'm sure the statistics have changed. It's actually pretty hard to get statistics on things like this, I found. But 50% that's a lot. That's very high. And the reason is because there is so much cash in these businesses generally. And I tell my team all the time, I say, look, you're not armed because you're trying to stop, whoever from stealing the ATM or something. You're armed because you want to make sure that the staff and customers are safe. I always say, and sometimes people don't like it. Our goal is to protect people. That's why we're there. But we don't do unarmed. And the other problem with unarmed security is here in Maryland, you have to go through a decent amount of training, especially now, to be an armed guard. There's a higher standard of training, and you find that people who invest in training, they're generally trying to make it like more of a career. Whereas someone who's unarmed, at least in the past, it's been, they're looking for a job, looking for some work. There's nothing wrong with that, but the people who are really, really into it and really focused, you tend to attract a higher level of employee, at least on my end, when you do armed, and I have less problems, more professional stuff.
So what else should somebody look for when thinking through about the security firm that they should work with?
Yeah, I mean, let's say, you have a dispensary and you're having Ric Flair come through to market his product line or something like that. If Ric Flair's coming through, I don't know what kind of crowds, Ric Flair's pulling these days, but it could be pretty big, so is that security team going to have the staffing where they can bump it up, they can increase? Are these people that they bring going to be professional? Are they going to be personable? Are they going to be welcoming? And are they going to, make sure that everybody's safe and the event is orderly? So your customers have a good experience. Are they going to will the team work overnight if need be? Let's say you have, an increase in break-ins in your area and you're worried about your facility being hit. Maybe you say, hey, can you guys put an overnight person here? Well, does that team have the ability to put a person who's going to work overnight? And are they going to actually be vigilant instead of just sleeping in the car? Yeah. And you can tell, like, when you hire a security company, are they well dressed? Do they look good? Do they look presentable? The biggest difference, I said this at my NECAN event actually on Saturday too. The number one giveaway from like a sloppy security guard or security company to like a professional one is, will they take a problem and escalate it instead of de-escalating a small problem? Because security is supposed to take a small problem and de-escalate it and make sure that your business is running better. If they take a problem and they escalate it, what are they doing there? Why do you have them? You're just creating more problems. And unfortunately, we see that a lot with, poorly trained guys. It's unfortunate, but you just increase the training. You teach them how to de-escalate. Some people are naturally gifted at it. I've seen it. I remember I hired a guy. He did years as a SWAT guy. And then he wound up selling insurance after he retired. He was just a very fun, personable guy. And he was so slick, he could de-escalate almost any situation, this guy. Remember, some people have it naturally, but, some are trained to do it. But like I said, you do not want somebody who's just going to escalate a situation. Yeah.
That's especially when there's so much on the line and there's tension and people are armed.
Yeah.
That would be Terrible.
When I went to the conference on Saturday, I actually couldn't find the entrance. So I'm walking around, I see a security guard, a little bit down the street. I'm like, oh, my people. So I'm going to go ask this guy, how do I get into the conference? And when I walk up to him, I'm like, hey, man, which way is the conference? And he says, up there. And I'm like, okay, do I take this street a little further down or do I, just immediately cut through this alleyway? He said, man, it's up there. He like waved me off. I remember being like, if I was like an angry, agitated person, I would have got upset at the way this guy was talking to me. And he was paid to be there by the conference, but he didn't even want to actually give me a good direction. He just wanted me to leave him alone so he could go back to playing Candy Crush or something, so.
Speaking of stories, you've probably seen a lot in what you do. What are some of the wildest things you've seen?
Yeah, I got some good ones. So this was a fun one. I actually forgot to touch on this when you asked me about perimeter security, but tinting your windows is important. Having tinted windows, so your staff inside can see out of the building, but people outside can't see in. And I'll give you a quick story for why that's important. So one day I was working at a dispensary in Baltimore, and as I'm sitting there, I'm looking out. I see some people on the camera, kind of across the street moving pretty fast. So I look through the tinted window and I see two guys with black rifles running up to the dispensary. I'm like, oh no. So I lock the door, secure the building, pull everybody in the back where it's safe. And I'm like, what's going to happen? I go up there. These guys get in front of the building and they're airsoft rifles. These guys are just playing airsoft out in front of the building, young adult men. But it was funny because I think they may have painted the rifles to look more realistic or something, but I think multiple people called the police on them because it was a very sketchy looking situation. But it was useful, the fact that I could see them on the camera and through the tinted windows, and the building was already, in a safe state before they even got there. So, it's pretty funny. People love that story because it's so crazy. I had another funny story. This kind of relates to making sure you have a flexible company that you work with. One of my places that I work at had a gas fire underneath the shopping center. So it wasn't their business. It was an adjacent or a business that was close by. Had some type of fire that went into some gas pipe under the complex, and all the power got shut down. And it was just a crazy thing. So you can see this fire spouting out of this pipe, and they shut down all the power. And they, in Maryland, dispensaries are required to have backup generators, to make sure that power is getting, to the facility and so that the cameras stay active. But they were worried because if someone is an opportunistic criminal and they see hey, the power's down, they're not thinking, oh, Maryland state regulations are going to have, a backup generator running in there. They're like, oh, I'm just going to break in here. So I had to sit in the business, overnight for a couple of days till they got that sorted. But, having somebody who's going to be able to do that, you gotta pick your partners well. It's a pretty fun one.
What should be the budget that someone like a dispensary should set aside for security monthly?
That's a really good question. I would say my personal preference, depending on the size of your dispensary, I think one guard is fine. Just one. I think all day coverage is best. I think one guard all day. If you have a big event, you can flex up to maybe two or more or something like that. I don't think nighttime security is that necessary unless there's an increase in break-ins in your area, or if you have some other type of intel that may have you do that. And then just trying to find the pay rate. Unfortunately, in Maryland, prices are always increasing. They just changed the training requirements, which is gonna, I think, I'm anticipating seeing an increase in security costs here in Maryland. I'm not sure how it is in other states, but anywhere from you're going to pay anywhere from 35 to maybe even up as much as like $55 an hour per guard. You see, sometimes more. I mean, it could depend on the circumstances. So you have to kind of budget that along with, you know, what kind of hours are you looking at for your business? And then normally that'll come with like, you know, some type of fee for a project manager or a supervisor or something like that. And then you also have alarm response, which can vary greatly business to business. Yeah.
In your opinion, let's say if I was a dispensary and cash is, or maybe I'm new and I don't know about my cash flow situation to have an arm board all the time,
Mm-hmm.
is having someone there when you're opening a dispensary or closing a dispensary, which area or which time makes more sense?
Yeah.
Based on your experience.
Yeah. Actually, in a situation like that, I would look at, well, in my opinion, I mean, somebody can try your business opening or closing. It can go either one. It's a good idea to try to figure out what days you have the highest traffic on and then try to prioritize that. I've seen companies do it just weekend security or like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I would say if you have to pick between morning or evening, I would probably go evening. Generally, there's more stuff going on in the evening. You're going to have a lot more like disgruntled customers after a long day at work, you know, but things happen, you know, at all times of the day. It's generally better to take a look at your cash flow and do an analysis on your business like that and figure out what times are the peak for the most customers coming in, because obviously the most customers coming in is the most likely time you're going to need security. If you're doing no security in the morning, just in the evenings, make sure you're running that buddy system in the morning. Make sure that your staff are very vigilant when they're opening the facility, and make sure that, you know, I would prefer if you have a staff member that even, I mean, this may be going overboard, but maybe they can pull the cameras up on their phone and just check around the building or something before they go inside. If they see somebody strange kind of hanging around in the front of the building and going in the back, you know.
And what else haven't we covered regarding security?
If your business has a lot of registers, make sure that you have great camera coverage over the registers. I mean, all around those registers. This is not necessarily a security related tip, but this is useful for business owners because all the time you're going to have a bud tender maybe mis-scanning an item, throwing it in a bag or something like that and handing it to the customer. When the customer gets an extra pre-roll or, you know, something in their bag, they may not come back and report it, right? You know, they may just kind of be like, oh, great. But it could cause a headache for your inventory team because now they're like, some of our cannabis is disappearing and they try to keep very careful track of it. So being able to take a look at those registers, like literally right next to where the register is, often, you know, set the product down while they're ringing it out, just making sure that you've got good camera coverage there. It's useful. Also, if you have like a curbside or delivery option, make sure that you've got good coverage in those areas. Another thing I'd say is have a plan for when you're receiving deliveries into your business, or if you're a grow facility, when you're sending one out, just because that's a time when I would say you could see, you know, maybe a criminal try to do something. Here in Maryland, we had an incident a couple months ago where there was actually a cash pickup and somebody robbed them. So you got to be careful doing cash pickups and drop off, you know, and you got to always be vigilant. You can't ever get too complacent because the you know, maybe you've done it 100 times and nothing has ever happened, so you're just kind of relaxed. But you got to understand the nature of the business we're in, which is, you know, there is a lot of cash, and until we get a change to that, you know, we always have to be careful.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, you dropped some gems. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
Where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so our company is called Bri-Bet Security Solutions. Yep, there's a hyphen between Bri and Bet. Let me pull up the website. I don't know if I can share my screen. But just go to Bri-Bet.com. BRI-BET.com, just like behind my head.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely, Tommy. I had a blast.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, thank you for your support. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening to the KayaCast podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app, or visit our website to learn more about our guests and to access the full archive of episodes from the show. Join us next time as we continue to explore the world of cannabis and help you grow, launch, and scale your business.